can relax.
Cool.
Hello, we're back. I can see we've got 15 viewers on the new stream already, so looks like people are finding the stream okay. So Victor had some problems with his audio, so he is going to present tomorrow instead. So we have 3 presentations in this session. And we'll see Victor tomorrow. Okay. This has been really nice so far. If you go to the website for the workshop, at the bottom you see a bit with talk abstracts and statements. And I think most people talking have also uploaded a short abstract there. I've seen that Jack is doing some nice organizational work behind the scenes, pasting these into the forum for you to look at as well. So there we go. Right, it's now 6:35. So if you're ready, Tinkuta, if you'd like to introduce yourself and do your presentation. Oh, I need to make you the presenter so that you can interact with the slides, I think. Excuse me, I forgot to do that. Yeah. Okay, I'll leave it with you.
Hello. Good evening. So I'm Tinkuta Heinzel. I'm senior lecturer in textiles. So I'm not really a programmer, rather an amateur. And my presentation today, it's about singing patterns. And it's actually something somehow fascinated me for a long time since I discovered the texts of Sophie de Rosier. She's a French anthropologist who worked for a long time in South America and Andean. She was interested in Andean textiles. And at some point she discovered that actually there was a way of notating the patterns of weaving textiles through thinking, which is quite innovative and not so well known, or was not so well documented before. But it seems it's quite an old way of doing or weaving. And for me, it's interesting because thinking while working, it's something which will send us, for example, to the sailor movements or slave movements at the same time. So it's something that has to do with coordination of your body movements and so on. But it's something different as when you have to do it with weaving, because it's mostly coding actually the way you're gonna select the threads and how you're gonna do how you're gonna create your pattern. And sorry, this slides. And Sophie de Rosier has quite an extensive work on studying the Andean textiles. She was interested, for example, into the patterns. She was interested into the techniques they use, the weaving looms, what kind of weaving looms they have. And at some point, she found out in the last page of the early 17th century chronicle from South America that, or she started to think about the fact that this kind of notation was a page, it has to do with a weaving pattern. So it's about the chronicle of the Fray Martín de Muroa, the History de l'origine e genealogia real de los reyes incas del Perú. And she was convinced, and it's a small specification saying that it's actually a coded specification for weaving of a belt worn during by the Koyas during the corn festival. It's quite an old document dating probably from 1590 or 1611, and she was really trying to understand or to give some hypotheses about how this code specification actually worked. And how, because that's a mixture between numbers and colors, spelled colors, which translates weaved with warp substitution. And it's very interesting because she actually advanced to hypotheses. That's one, the trying different looms you can find in Peru, in some regions of Peru. One is based on the loom from Potolo region. The other one, it's part of a collection of Textiles Museum in Washington, coming from Vilcapampa Grau region in Peru. And she is very interesting the way she advanced, she's doing her research, because it's a mixture of studying the language. Did the chronicle in the Middle Age understood, for example, she was questioning if the chronicle understood the dialects of the people in the region. What kind of artifacts, what was the result of this kind of weaved belts? How exactly the weave structure of these belts looks like. And finally, she also take a look in the looms techniques. And as said, she advances that probably these are resulting the code, the specification code are coming from two different looms possibly. And she's tried to develop, to understand the structure and how does it work. And here's the kind of her attempts to visualize her hypothesis. And here you also have a sample of what she started to weave herself based on that poem, and how this structure might look like. And I was quite interested in this because it seems to me it's quite an interesting phenomena. I was for a long time looking, because with all this kind of new developments in electronic textiles and the integration of the electronics into textiles, you have these options to work textiles and sound. Until the beginning of the 20th century, actually, textiles were used to isolate sound. And this is quite a new area, I would say, of research of connecting textiles and sound and trying to work with that. And for me, this kind of research and this kind of approach of notating the pattern, the textile weaving pattern into sound, and by thinking the pattern, it's quite original. And the only other similar, I would say, phenomena you can find in Iran. It has been documented by Mehdi Aminian, who's also a musician. And that's a link where you can see a film about the way the weavers in Iran, for example, also using singing to describe the patterns they have to weave. But compared to the Andean textiles, the personal knots allow this kind of more point by point, I would say, structure, and it's much more easy actually to translate this kind of, I would say, color into a kind of singed poem. And I was thinking if that's a way, for example, to translate or to play with this kind of processes, and imagine a way in which we can translate, for example, thinking into a pattern, and starting to work and trying to code around this, trying to recreate, I would say, the researcher Sophie de Rosier or Mehdi Ahmadini documentation of all processes of weaving and singing as notation. I just suddenly realized actually there are several approaches, and it's very. I was confronted also with the idea I was not knowing very well what I'm doing and what I'm searching for, and I still think that there are different approaches to possibly the approach even more than that, like generating patterns using different weaving structure generated by voice recognition, like trying to use the voice recognition and then translate this into a pattern, but also trying to use reading patterns while weaving, and this could be used both. That's a computer who read for a computer, or it's a computer who read for a human while weaving. So it's very interesting because it's very, I would say, fluid transformation about, and we really have to think what kind of performance and what exactly might happen. For whom are we reading, or for whom the computer will read, for example, a text, color, translating a pattern. Also, while starting to think about the textiles structures, it's very interesting. I said the patch notes is a point-based pattern, so it's point by point. It's like the screen we have nowadays, pixel by pixel, one next to another, which makes actually the translation of the pattern much more easy. But it seems that in the case of Andean textiles, it's actually quite a complex, I would say, structure, because as Sophie de Rosier showed it, we deal with a loom with 3 span floats in atelier alignment and two horizontal color change. And if it's about thinking how we can render this into a process, it's becoming much more complex and much more complex, both semantically and processual in the way of weaving or doing textiles. And therefore, I'm still working around this kind of issues. For example, what kind of lexical numerical structure do we need to develop for the two kind of approaches, like generating patterns through the voice recognition or vice versa, using computer reading for weaving. And as briefly mentioned, how to represent the weaving process. If our focus will be much more on the pattern and pattern visualization or pattern realization, or it's going to be more on the process, it's going to be supportive for the process itself. It's going to be much more performative, and the focus must be on the process itself. I was playing around, so here just trying to translate, to take this, playing about this lexical aspects, and I was trying different models, but it's for certainly, I'm not a coder, and it's certainly some research quite in the beginning, but I think will be extremely interesting to think about what kind of possibilities actually this kind of thinking patterns offer, even nowadays, and how this could be used for performative, I would say, but also for much more functional approaches related to weaving. Here are some other attempts of trying to translate the color into kind of poems, and playing around in processing. This is what I have to say for now, and of course, as said, it's mostly I'm in the beginning of thinking about how this kind of performative and live coding could be brought into the textiles on the weaving processes, and also to consider who's this weaver is going to be. Is this weaver a computer, or it's a human? Is this notation, sound notation, accompanying a computer again, or it's going to accompanying a weaver, and it's going to be performative in some other way? And I don't know if there are some questions.
You are now unmuted.
Sorry, 1 second as I re-enter the room. Thank you very much, Tinkuta. That was a beautiful presentation, very exciting. We've already got a question in from Jack. Do people sing patterns to each other as a means of sharing or talking about them? Can they see the patterns that others sing without weaving them at all?
So if you look to the documentary film from Iran and the way they're using it's a way of thinking these patterns to each other. And they also use some visualizing support for that. But we are not sure if there was a visualizing support for the Andean textiles, which makes the things much more interesting. Was this a way? And we also don't know if the Andean, because it's very small, as you could saw the looms, the drawings of the looms. It's normally for one weaver, and we don't know if it was something like a poem. The weaver were learning by heart, and were just thinking for themselves, trying to make these choices, because it's a quite complex structure. If you can see, with two shifts and so on. So with different colors which come up, and probably this was somehow supportive in a way of their doing weaving by hand. So I would say there are different approaches as well for that, but there are different also textile structures and dimensions.
There's a question just asking for the link. Is that the link to the video, Iris? We can share that afterwards. Just yeah, there were quite a few links in the presentation. Maybe we can share the slides if you're happy with that, Tinkuta.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I actually, you can find here that the text of Sophie de Rosier. Some of them are in French, but you might find also English version of those research. The one I use for this presentation is an interpretation of technical weaving data found in an early 17th century chronicle, which focused precisely on this kind of thinking pattern and the codification or interpretation of this chronicle, 17th century chronicle.
Yeah, we at the Homo Textor conference in Munich, there was some discussion about whether ancient Greek weaving structures related to the rhythmic structure of ancient Greek lyric. I'll share some links to.
That'd be interesting. It's a much more older way of notation, actually, that we think.
Yeah, the problem is that almost everything from that period is lost, so it's all very speculative.
Here we still have some documents. And,
fragments. Yeah. What I find interesting is looking at the loom and these strings under tension and how close they are to a musical instrument. And I think once you start talking about sonifying patterns or singing patterns, it seems to me that it's sort of crying out for the strings to vibrate with the patterns, and somehow the vibrating strings to relate to the weaving patterns. Maybe you could do something.
True. Yeah. Actually, probably this would be the another kind of connection, because I mentioned the fact that textile fabrics were used to isolate sound. They were known for having these properties. But it's true that if we think to the chords, and that's actually a connection which make them look like an instrument as well, harp, or I don't know.
We have one more very quick question, because we're a bit over time, but I'm aware that we've lost one presentation today, so we can be a bit more relaxed. From Jack again, cultures often encode stories in song and in textiles. Is it the same with singing textiles?
If I'm trying to think to some examples. Well, we all know this kind of I don't know. I'm thinking about Homer and thinking about stories in song, or stories in textiles. I'm thinking to Bayeux tapestry, for example, which is a kind of telling the story of battle, as a presenting this, make it available to be presented in a church. I don't think that thinking textiles is quite the same. Even though at some point, if you take a look to this presentation, this chronicle actually. You have this kind of codes or words describing numbers and colors, but in the same time here you can find some words which are relating to days of the week, or it still look like there's a signification between colors and I don't know, something much more metaphorical, I would say, but I'm not aware of this, if there's stories in this kind of thinking textiles patterns. I cannot say that.
Great. We better leave it at
3D
that,
printing, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Evan bringing in the 3D printing. I think it's quite hard for 3D printers to weave, but yeah, I'm sure some interesting things to explore. Yeah, thank you very much, Tinkuta. Next up, it's Kit. If you're there.
Thank you also
Kit.
for the invitation.
Oh, my pleasure.
Patience.
Yeah, if you'd like to unmute yourself, Kit, and bring yourself. It's a bit of a shame with this format, you don't hear the applause of the audience, but if you can imagine it, I'm sure everyone's applauding in their front rooms. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Will you be screen sharing? Is that right, Kit?
I will, yes.
Okay. So I need to just make you the presenter to make that possible. Excuse me while I remember what to press. There you go. So I think if you screen share now, everything should go fine. Great. I'll leave you to introduce yourself then. Thank you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you all virtually. My name is Kit. I'm currently a software engineer at Microsoft. Excuse me for the paraphernalia. I'm in the middle of an internal hackathon, so that's been going down. But today I'm going to talk about Barbara. And Barbara was a system that I created with Charlie Roberts and Jillian Smith in October of 2019. It began then as like a school project back when I was a student, at WPI in the good old days of October 2019. And I've continued to work on it since then. Barbara was actually one of my first really introductions to live coding and the algorithm scene. It was only a few months prior to when I started development that I saw my first algorithm, and I was like immediately captivated, like I think so many people are. And I was like, this is cool, but like I want my own language. Like I think I wanted a system that I created that I understood, that that I could have some claim over maybe. But yeah, so a little bit about Barbara. It's I guess the slogan is live coding languages for quilters. I think that's definitely an interesting slogan. It makes you think, what does that even mean? What does that entail? And maybe I'll shed some light on that. So Barbara initially began as a project where users will be able to create their own like mini languages using parsing expression grammars. And kind of like live code these like visuals with these mini languages. And then on the other side, quilting came into it as this kind of cultural preservation and a way to like include art forms that are traditionally like tangible and not digital whatsoever, and bring them into this space, and also like as a potential tool to like teach coding to live quilters and an investigation in language-oriented design. So it's kind of like all these things coming into this one project. And so like these two worlds, like live coding and quilting, kind of somehow are working together, and I think it goes pretty well, at least from my personal experience. And so I'll talk a little bit more about like what Barbara is exactly. So I'll open the playground here. So Barbara combines a couple of things. It's a virtual machine, and it uses peg.js for parsing expression grammar, which allows you to write your own grammars to turn like a user-written like language and translate that into the target language, which is then interpreted by the interpreter, or like the virtual machine. And so the target language was something that I worked on. It's a stack-based language. It also uses reverse Polish notation. So the operands are before the operators. And so, I'll just show a little example here. And so when you open the Barbara playground, you can change the grammar. So you can change, this is how you change the language itself that you're coding with. This is the kind of the default language I created. It's not great in any way, since it's pretty much, as you can see, it's just repeating the target language. It's not doing anything to add to the target language. It's not making it particularly like focused around a domain. It's just showing you the commands you can run. And I guess it's maybe like a geometric domain, but it's not any more specific than that. But interestingly enough, it's actually like the language I'm the most comfortable with, because I wrote the target language, and so something that emulates the target language is what I find the best to use. But the whole point of this is that someone else could use this target language and make their own grammar, and make, for instance, like a grammar that explicitly makes pizzas, like using pizza syntax and semantics, and or like a triangle language where you can only like live code triangles. I think that would be that'd be pretty cool. But so yes, so we have this target language. There's also like this tutorial like on the right here that has information. For instance, this is the documentation of the target language, so you can read about how all of them work, and it steps you through. And so I just want to talk a little bit about some of the features of Barbara. So like I said, it's a tool for quilting, but also a tool for live coding. And I actually did perform in an algorithm with Barbara. It was interesting. I think it was like the day before the algorithm. I didn't really have any function that would allow you to like pulse through or like loop through like patterns. I did have this basic start loop pattern that would like refresh your input every like second, but I mean that wasn't cool at all. And so I think it was the day before. I was like, okay, I want something like super fast, and so like I wrote this pulse function that takes in the time between like refresh and a true or false value for whether or not the canvas is cleared.
You are now on.
And I'm going to believe that's true. She also mentioned that Barbara uses svg.js. It's all SVGs. It's not like WebGL at all. It's just totally SVGs, which makes it a little less, I guess, powerful, but still like quaint in its own way. But so I can do pulse here. Ooh. Yeah, kind of, maybe. No, not yet. That's a great feature. I will definitely add that to the GitHub issues, but I can like kind of zoom in here real quick. And so it's essentially, you can see kind of the downfalls of the stack of my grammar here, because it kind of reveals like the reverse Polish notation. It's not really doing anything for you. It's kind of difficult to read as well. And so that's why, having better grammars and really focusing on that makes like a whole world of difference. Obviously, I mean, I understand this quite well, but to someone else, it kind of looks like gibberish and not really easy at all. But yes, so this is like an example of like an algorithm type like design you can do, and there's also like this live code mode that creates like its minimalist view, for live coding. But then on the other hand, there's still quilting to consider. And so one of the other features that were added was this kind of like information page where you could share, if you were trying to digitally recreate a quilt, you could like talk about it. And so this quilt I kind of created as an example. This quilt is called the Quilt for Equality, and I wanted to digitally recreate it. And so Barbara also offers a platform where you can share information about quilts you've made. If they're recreations or if they mean anything to you, it's just like a good way of preserving, this culture and this art form digitally and providing more like accessibility to it. I mean, if you don't have quilting materials, but you have a laptop, you go at it. And another cool thing about this is also there's this kind of variance feature where if you export, like if you save a design and like export it to be public, and then someone else opens it and edits it and then saves it, it's kind of like a GitHub like repo, like source control. It'll like save the different variations of patterns and quilts people have made, and it shows them in this interesting way, so you can see like who took inspiration from what you made and who changed it, who added things to it. And it's like a really good way, I think, of like building community. This Mara Rose example also shows how mathy you can get. I found out about Mara Roses and I was like, oh gosh, like I need to add this, like I need to be able to do this in Barbara. So like I immediately added like a polar function and like radiance and yeah, oof. But no, it's super cool. Maybe not as related to quilting as it could be, but still cool. But yeah, this is something I've been working on for a while. This is something I'm deeply passionate about. This is so cool 3D view. You can see your quilt like blowing in the wind here using Three.js. That's a fun little feature. But yeah, this has been an awesome project to work on, and I have to thank like Charlie so much for all his help and guidance and support with this. It's truly my number one fan, or Barbara's number one fan, I should say. And yeah, I guess if there are any questions or anything I can demo, I'm happy to do so.
Moment. Right. Okay. It always takes me a short moment to reconfigure all my windows. Where is the YouTube window? Sorry. That was really nice. And bang on time. Thank you. So you're taking quilting as a starting point, and seems it's going in some quite interesting directions with this figure here. But how sort of grounded in quilting do you want to keep it?
Yeah, I think that's totally up to, the user. Like that's the whole point, right? Of like domain-specific languages, and making a language to fulfill like very specific purpose, or like a group of people. So obviously the grammar that I've made doesn't even use that much quilting terminology, but you could definitely make a language that uses like the perfect quilting terminology, or perfect like pizza making terminology. I think quilting has such like warmth to it that it made for a great start, and especially for like geometric patterns, like, and especially patterns like heavily were parts of making Barbara. And so it provided like a great starting point. And I think the great thing about this system is that like it could go as far into quilting as you wanted it to go. But if you weren't a quilter per se, and had some other art form, you could attempt to kind of digitize that with your own language somehow.
Cool. There's a question from Evan. Would you make the quilting language, or is that up to others? He'd like to see what you'd come up with personally. But
I could, yeah. I could make a quilting language, make my own grammar. Yeah, I'm not the best at making grammars. Still a work in process. But yeah, I could try and see what I could. I think I did make like a basic quilting language once, like using quilting terminology. But I'll see what I can come up with, and like make a post about it or something. Yeah.
Cool. I can see there's a couple more people typing. Kate Sikio points out that she's all about bespoke languages, so I think she's just showing her support there. And there's a question from YouTube. Yeah, so you mentioned you're doing it in SVG, and that you were maybe looking to do something more than SVG is capable of. What would that be, or?
Ooh, I think I would probably actually stay with SVG. That it has a certain charm to it. I think Charlie and I had a discussion, about like WebGL with canvases over SVGs, and we just decided to do SVGs. And they certainly have their limitation, especially for making these kind of crazy visuals. But they're so cute that I can't get rid of them. I'm entranced. Yeah, so I think I'd stay with SVGs, but I would work probably more on playing around with other aspects of the language, like for instance, like integrating time better. Like right now you can't really pause anything, or like adding like a wait command or things that let you play more around with time. I think that would be interesting.
Yeah, I like SVGs a lot too. I think Sarah Groff Palermo's system is based on SVG, if I'm not mistaken. So I think that is all the questions for now. But Shelley Knotts does say she's typing. Yeah, you never know when these chat things say so and so is typing, whether they're actually going to hit.
No, never.
Yeah, there's someone, Alvaro says SVG filters are a whole world. I think
yes.
I think SVG's getting a lot of support, basically. So yeah.
Yes, SVG filters are implemented in Barbara. So
cool. Okay, nice one. I don't think Shelley's going to finish typing her comments. So, and if she ever does, then we can continue that in the forum. So thank you very much, Kit. And looking forward to seeing more quilting languages, DSLs in the future. Paolo, are you here? Paola, sorry. Yeah, I can see. So this should be the final presentation. Because Victor's going to do his tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what time. We might have to start 10 minutes early or something to fit in the extra presentation tomorrow. Shelley did eventually finish her comment, but we'll continue the discussion in the forum. Jack says Paola is no longer in the users list, but I think she is. Maybe she's just having some problems connecting. Hello.
Hello?
Hello, I think I can hear you. Hi, Paula.
Okay, nice. My internet dies just in the moment. Sorry.
Are you calling from Peru, is that right?
Yes, so the internet sometimes is not the best in the world.
Cool, so, no problem. Are you going to share your screen or just talk, or what's your plan?
No, actually it would be great if you could... I'm just going to show some things with the webcam, so maybe it would be good if you...
Cool. Great, that seems to be working nicely. Shall I go on mute then and let you introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Cool. You are now muted.
I've done a kind of fast setup in here. If I look to the other side, it's because I keep on forgetting that I have another computer at the same time, which is showing what I'm presenting. Well, what I'm going to show you right now is really a very brief demo of what I call the Singing Textiles project. This I've been developing. The Singing Textiles project as such maybe has like 5 years, a bit more, 5 years, and it has a lot to do with what Trincuta was talking about. So in a way, I don't need to explain that much, at least from the part of the Andean textile tradition. I would like to add maybe some things that concern my specific practice. Well, in the Singing Textile project, I sort of let's say I develop interfaces, but I also play with the, let's say, translation or visualization of sound related to Andean textiles, but in what refers to Amazonian textile tradition from South America, more particularly from Peru and Brazil. The link in between a pattern, more specifically embroidery, and sound. And this I will explain while showing some works. So basically what I'll do is I'll show some of the interface that I've developed during this time. Then I'll show what I'm developing right now, how it connects, and hoping basically for some feedback for the new interface, no? That it's in the process of being developed. So first, here is this Chipivo Texta. Here you can see this I developed in 2015. Actually, it was interesting to hear that someone mentioned the Hilbert curve, and this is an idea that I was playing with these textiles. This textile is embroidered, say in the style of a community from the Peruvian rainforest that is called the Chipivo Texta, that by now is popular, let's say, among the New Age culture because of their ayahuasca consume. So there's a lot of tourism from North America and Europe. So to basically experiment the cleansing properties and the experience of having such a strong drink, no? There is this, in all of my work, I think there is this reference of this clash of cultures. But I guess it's in a way, sometimes I be a clash, but sometimes I try to unify this in a way, no? So what I did next was, as you can see, there's a lily pad in here, and usually the way they embroider the textiles, which is most commonly done by women, is that some of the textiles in the center have the chacruna flower, which is one of the components of the ayahuasca drink. So I played with the idea, with this sort of, say, like references or transcultural references, one could say. So I put a lily pad in here that looks like a flower. And it's actually a circuit, so there are some resistances. And when you play it, it actually emits some sound from Chipivo Texta singer. Her name is Auristela Brito. And initially I thought about this piece for gallery setup, but I immediately realized that it could be played, that it could be performed live. And performing live with textiles is something that I did very early, maybe 2007, 2008, and not related to heritage cultures, let's say, more to the female role in textile and computer development, let's say. So, but then I retook this with this piece, and I can maybe show you a bit if this works, how it sounds. So it's basically like this. So I've made most of the recordings. They're field recordings from the Amazonian rainforest and from Auristela Brito's voice. And well, it started with this. I started performing with this, and then of course I let's say widened this performance more and more. So I added this textile, which is, let's say, now the Andean become more present. And this textile it's an ucuña that I intervened. It's actually an Andean ucuña that it has a visualization of sound. Some words in Quechua, I visualized them, and then I distorted the pattern, and then I embroidered it again, but this was done by a machine, right? And what this one does with this little handle, I'm going to say, it's like when one pulls it or stretches it, it distorts the sound of the Chipivo textile. So in a way, I wanted to give it more dynamism to this performance. I won't go that much in the relation in between sound and textiles within the Andean tradition, but I will just say that it's not only Andean thing that actually the Amazonian inhabitants have this very, very present. And the interesting thing is that these designs that are called kene are actually very linked to sound. So this actually comes from, one could say, a performance from especially one Chipivo artist that she, let's say, she would be singing. Actually, you can find this in YouTube, while passing her fingers through the embroidery threads. So this, I thought it was interesting, the way that they were very open. They were like saying like, yeah, yes, of course, these designs can be sung. But also how this idea was contested with from a researcher, and I think he was Austrian, ethnomusicologist, and he said in some of these studies, he has manifested that it has been actually developed in recent times for attracting tourists, and so they could sell their textiles more. And I thought that was a bit interesting. So I tried to find more. I made this documentary, and actually, according to the people that I talked with, they said that it's not that it was related like that. It's not that it can be read actually like a score, but that indeed it can be interpreted that some of these designs can give a reference of rhythms, yes, of rhythm, and there has been a tradition, this sort of performatic tradition, in which two women would paint a vessel, one against, let's say it was a big ceramic vessel, and they would paint the vessel, and one couldn't see what the other one was doing. But with the singing, they would, it was some sort of competition, let's say, no? So they would paint it, and with the singing, the idea was to actually get tuned with the other one, and sort of pick up the design that the other one was doing. So to complete this design, no? And I thought it was very interesting how for some cultures, the sensorial experience is a continuity, whereas in us in the Western view, we tend to split our sense. We tend to split and classify, perceptions very much in between the senses. And I in that sense, I think that the digital realm kind of allows us to understand very fast that information finally will be just information, no? And in a way, it sort of connects with this, say, like ancient or more long-lasting tradition from other cultures, no? Of course, it's delicate to talk about this because it could be criticized. And this is like a recent discussion that I heard, and that are also being pointed out. Like if one, by doing this, is actually modifying this cultural view to fit to that of the Western world, Western sort of reading of things. And my point in that is that we should start thinking about some of our technological advancements as something more collective. Let's say if the computer wouldn't exist without textiles, the computers wouldn't exist without the algorithms developed in the Persian Empire or information from China. And in that sense, I've been wondering about technology itself and the interesting phenomenon that happened here in the Americas, in the Native Americas. How technology, or let's say, especially related to writing, what to say, branch from a different, let's say, it was born from a very different tradition. Say, in the Middle East, clay tablets were used. In other cultures, paper were used for storing writing systems and information. But in the Andes, it's controversial, the subject. It's still not defined if there was actually writing or not. But there's this one line of thought that sees in the tocapus, which is a design, a particular set of designs that you can find in the Inca, particularly Inca clothing, but more generally in Inca design. That proposed that could be a type of writing system. And but there's also another line of thought, and maybe that's the most popular one, that sees in the quipu sort of the device, the textile or fiber device that would be that could be actually storing this type of information, something more similar to what we see as writing. Now, I personally have even if I work around the subject, I have a somewhat critical idea, a critical stance on this, because I don't know if we are also getting the same in what I was talking before, if from our Western, although I'm still not sure if I'm Westerner or not, to tell the truth, if we are trying to accommodate other thought systems to what we understand, but still, I think it's interesting to play with this idea, with this conflict. So I've been developing these quipu-like interfaces. I don't know if, I guess you know what a quipu is, well, many of you, but I have an example in here. So this is not a real keyboard. It's a keyboard that I've done. It's one of these interfaces that I use for live performance. And as you can see, it's, what they did is they coded with notes, no? So they used the decimal system, and depending on the position where the notes were, some type of information was stored. What we understand up to date is that it was numerical information that had to do with taxes mostly, but it said that it actually stored other type of information, such as poetry or even historical events, although that can also be a bit be contested as well, because especially in what regards to the Inca, history as we think of it is not, they weren't trying to sort of keep up to the real facts, but more like reconstruct a more epic past, no? But so yes, I need to point out that this is not exclusively Inca. This comes from pre-Inca times. This could be, the Quipu technology could have more than 3,000 years actually. But the one that I'm showing here now is in Inca style. The coding, I follow the Inca style. So I actually coded in ASCII a phrase, a couple of verses of the actual song or portion of song that is stored in here. I'll do a little test as well. So what this does is actually reinterprets this polyphonic composition from the 1600s. That was quite interesting for me because it's actually a Baroque polyphonic composition, but it was all sung in Quechua, which is the native, one of the predominant native language from the Andean region. And but let's say I was interested because it was syncretic in its nature, no? Because actually it's a chant for the Virgin Mary, but all throughout the lyrics it's being used and then references. So I'm interested in this syncretic sort of property, and how cultures intermixed and shift, and some things get translated, and this interpretation and the passing of information to one culture or another, or from one sense or the other. And well, basically the device that I'm going to show you, that it's still a prototype, so I'm not going to show how it works. It's connected to this Quipu, although the system is a bit different. You can see some of the parts in here. And what I'm doing is basically, let's say, the idea is to code through notes. Now, I'm still uncertain if I would use a computer next to this, so to code and change the sounds or the functions that each of these notes do, and the combination of each of these notes among them. But I'm going to put the microphone off for a bit, and I'm going to show you and then explain what it is. Okay, so this, I mean, it's a very simple mechanism. The idea is that it has some conductive textile, conductive thread. So whenever I do a knot, it's basically a switch. So the switch closes, and then the information is sent to either a Arduino or a computer, So the idea is to work, I mean, I've used resistances in such a way that it allows me to use one pin from the Arduino to control many of these nodes. And then depending on the voltage change, I can map it to different codes. So the idea is to say, if I do 2 nodes here and 1 node in here, something will happen. If I do another node in here, then another sound could be triggered or modified. The same with this one, and the idea is to have at least 5, and this gives me a lot of combinations. So my idea is to go to the very core of coding, let's say, the very simple coding, in a way a binary, in the sense that there's no not space not, and it would be let's say not space not space not space 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 not space, and depending on this I can achieve quite many combinations to allow me more variations, and maybe I will modify the sound in some of these ropes. I will modify the sound of the Chipivo that I have already developed, since they are connected, and work a bit like the Chipivo Texta, the Puña. Or maybe I will do it independently. This I haven't yet made my mind about. Maybe I will do both. But the idea is to sort of extend this performance and give it more variation. I think it's varied, but for me, of course, I want to make it very, very different per performance, So I don't know if I passed the time or it's okay.
You are now unmuted.
Oh, okay. I thought that my internet had failed.
No, it's all good. The internet was very smooth. Yeah, I'm just reconfiguring my system again. But yeah, that was really, really nice presentation. That's getting a lot of hearts appearing in the YouTube. A lot of hearts appearing in the YouTube comments. And it's so nice to have this very long view of digital technology going back thousands of years, as you say. And at the end, when you were talking about connecting these different systems you've made, it's just nice to think that you're connecting these with computers and cables, but somehow everything suddenly seems very textile, especially when you have wires going everywhere. How does it feel when you're moving between working with the Arduino and then working with the Chipivo? Do you feel that interconnection, or do they feel like different worlds still?
Yes, totally. I mean, I was thinking, but I didn't do it, to show this small clip out the Apollo computer. This memory is called rope memory module, and how women, like literally women, were sewing these cores by hand, and how it worked that there's this little magnet and the sewing goes here and it's just threads, and it's just so natural. And it's a bit strange, maybe to go back for going forward. But the interesting thing as well is that in Ande and also Aymara, well, Quechua and Aymara cosmovision or vision of the world, they have this view of, I never know again if to say they or us. I mean, I'm in this situation that I don't know where should I place myself, and maybe that's why I'm very interested in the syncretic, because maybe I'm a product of syncretism as well. But they have this, they have this word it's called Kipa, that interestingly, when you talk, I mean, I might flip it right now, but there's this couple actually of words that when you use them in a spatial sense, it means forward, but when you use them in a temporal space, it means backwards. Because of course, for the Andean vision, time is circular. So I think that plays very well with what I'm doing, right? In a way, this can be seen as an innovation, but it's also very clearly referring to a past. So I have this in my mind all the time, to go to the past to actually go forward.
Yeah, great. It's it feels like every discussion about technology is about building on the past and moving to this idyllic future, but at the moment it feels that connecting with the past is really important, and seeing identifying these cycles and so on. It feels like there's so many, I mean, even paths which haven't been taken, but also paths which have been taken and need to be. Sorry, I'm just rambling. Yeah, and Jonathan.
I want to say something else as well.
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's something that I discussed with you as well. The fact that Chipivo technology has survived up till the 20th century, so it can be a bit tricky to talk about the past. The same with the textiles, because these are living traditions. Still, people, especially in the Andean region and also in the Amazonian region, textiles still tell stories, and people can still tell you what each of these symbols mean, and they still mean something. I mean, it's not that all of this is based on archaeological remnants. Quipus are used still today. Now, it's true that so far, what we know, they are not fully understood. They are used more in ceremonies, but they seem to have been understood up till the 20th century, and this was lost, wasn't properly recorded. No, so it's also tricky. In any case, we can talk about this ancient origin, let's say, but it's a technology that has survived up till last century, that survives up till date as well, and that it also merged, no? And one wonders is if actually the fact that the quipus being seen as a writing system is because since it was used in colonial times, people that managed quipus saw writing and tried to accommodate it a bit to that system. So yes, I want to point this out.
Yeah, I think there's in just saying that it might be a writing system, it already puts it in the frame of sort of the Western current idea of what writing is, and with these technologies, they have much more to tell us in terms of different ways of thinking about what writing might be. But yeah, I'm kind of hogging the question time. Jonathan Royce said, I wonder if the concept of East and West even makes sense in such a project. This is such a global creolization of ideas, and also a multi-temporal one. So it's kind of beyond time and space potentially. But still, I guess it is sort of cited in. Although you're between Europe and the Andes yourself, aren't you? Moving between them. So, have you got a response to that?
Well, if I point this out, this is the idea of. I started with this idea, right? That this is beyond, let's say, this transcultural proposal, let's say. But the thing is that the subjects are very delicate, because once one talks about culture, immediately, especially within the academic realm, they want you to define, okay, which culture. And then suddenly cultures have a start and an end, right? They have a limit. It's like, okay, you belong here or you don't belong here. Which side are you taking? And that's why I feel the need to talk about this very clearly, and actually place myself in this syncretic position as well. That I can't really define myself. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm between Europe and I'm here right now, and I've been brought up in here, but also, I mean, I've been using the computer since I was a child. So that's also a technology that has been familiar to me since I was little. So it's a complicated. No, not complicated. I would say it's complex. It's complex, and it should be taken as complex, and not to attempt to be reductionistic, not to attempt this, that idea. Even if I reference a lot of the binary, we should go a bit beyond that and understand this binary separation is a bit that allows. I would say it's easier to handle, but doesn't mean that is necessarily the reflection of reality. No, reality, it would be continuous, I would say. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, I think for me, the discrete and the continuous are always present in mutual support, and you're just focusing on one aspect of something. But if you look at a Chipivo, it has so many continuous properties as well as discrete ones, and just to see it as a digital device, I think might be missing the point too. It's both things.
But that thinking is complex in essence. I mean, the fact that you can have these apparently contradictory or opposing thoughts and they work okay in your mind, it's because you are managing complexity without problem, let's say. But usually, I mean, not in all environments, this is as easily accepted, let's say.
Yes. Brilliant. So this has been lovely. We have in the programme some discussion time now. We have about a quarter of an hour left. So this is maybe an opportunity for people to continue asking questions or to make connections between different presentations, or for other presenters to rejoin Paola and myself in sharing your webcam and microphone and maybe making a statement, or we can continue otherwise taking questions for Paola. Anyone want to start a discussion connecting different talks? I have to say we didn't plan this part of the day too well. I now realise maybe we should have set up a kind of panel thing. I did find it interesting with Evan talking about space filling curves, Hilbert curve, and seeing that in your work. I think I saw some space filling curves. There's, in this particular session, there has of course been a lot of textiles work, and coming at it from different angles, making languages for describing textiles, making textiles for describing sounds as a kind of code. What other kind of connections can we find? In the first section, it was ostensibly about instruments, so we had Anne and Felipe talking about making languages for a piano. We had Magno reflecting on some philosophical concerns, Evan talking about his 3D printing, Van talking about this physical device that he was live coding, and Raffaella talking about her reprogrammable cello. Anything? So I have to jump between all these different chat systems to see. Yeah, I think this discussion session isn't really taking off just yet. Okay. I can see that Jack is typing something, and Evan. Okay, yeah, I think everyone's a bit overwhelmed. And Evan says the same. It's hard to discuss. I think when you've had quite intense series of 10-minute flash lightning presentations, it's quite hard to jump into discussion without some sleep. So maybe we should maybe reflect on that. Okay, Evan asks, where can we learn more about Mayan weaving?
Well, I don't know if he's asking me, but I'm not from Central America. So I have read not that much. I mean, I don't know much about Mayan weaving. What I do know is that they have a very particular technique, which is, I think it's, well, they have various techniques, but one of them, it's, what's the name in English? It's similar to this Andean technique of brocade. Mm-hmm. So I think they have this very particular, from the region, technique for brocade. But again, not my area. I wouldn't. I just used Mayan. I mean, contemporary Mayan design, because of course we need to clarify as well. Now, if we are talking about the ancient culture or the Maya people that still lives today, I'm talking right now about Maya people that live in the area and that are still called Maya people. I guess if one would search Mayan contemporary textile techniques or something like that on YouTube, you can get quite much. And again, this brocade, it's I remember there was very particular and very, very difficult technique from them, no? But beyond that, I can say because I'm from South America, not from Central America.
Yeah, I think Evan thought that you mentioned Mayan weaving, but is sort of generally interested in good references for learning about South American weaving. Perhaps that's something we could share some references through the forum about how to find out more about these techniques. Simon says, interesting to think about the different aspects of time, from close to real-time live coding and songs using textiles, head exploding. I guess that's makes me think about the kind of different time scales. Like with live coding music at an Algorave, you're trying to make a change, a new code every few seconds or something, for a kind of instant response, whereas working with weaving is might take a day to produce something, or maybe even, well, to wallpaper loom might take weeks, for example. And then with your performance, it's very immediate. Is there something about the different timescales you're working at with sonified quipus and?
I was thinking about time, and also typing more, let's say, within the ritual, let's say. I was thinking, I mean, especially in this piece, since I was very straightforward linking it to live coding, I remember, I mean, I haven't done much live coding myself. I just did this one presentation with actually, it was in the ICLC 2017, which I was doing a pure data patch while I was sewing, which was quite a difficult task. And of course, in such sense, this immediate effect that, let's say, more average live coding wants to attempts or achieves, let's say, I couldn't, it was a completely different sense of time, no? The audience actually had to wait while I was finish the sewing so one sound could be heard. Luckily, the audience was very understanding of this, whereas me, from the performatic side, it was quite it was stressful because I mean, when one is obviously performing like that, one thinks about the audience, right? So definitely in this kind of performance, especially when they have to do with live coding, it's actually much slower. It's true. In this one, it will also be slower. No, I mean, it's not technically possible for me to tie 5 notes at the same time. So that's something that I assume by now, no? And I work around this idea of a different time scale. And again, I was thinking of this ritual, no, and the term of craft, and how craft is also technique and sort of talent, no, and how one in the light coding, I mean, part of this, of the performance, is to actually show what a good coder you are and how fast you are. I mean, if you're slow, then you know the conventional way, it's just, it doesn't work as well, no. So there's this sort of ritual, this trance that one needs to get into. And this performatic, say, like showing off technique, let's say, in a way, you know, that also has to do with time as well, because you need to be fast in order to be seen as good, let's say.
Yeah, you have to be in that kind of state of, the trance is interesting, isn't it? It's kind of, that's again sort of cyclic feeling of time where you're in the moment, but the time is no longer going forward in the same way as it was before. So, in a loop. So there's a couple more comments. We've got 5 minutes left, so let's have a look. One is from Jonathan, who makes a nice point about how we've put together the day. So we had an instrument section and an algorithmic heritage section. But in the instrument section, there was some algorithmic heritage in terms of the use of the piano and the cello, although these are relatively new fangled instruments compared to the sort of 1,000-year-old looms. We still think of them as being part of our heritage. So why these two sessions were kept apart? Why weren't they brought together? And there's no good reason for that. I think that would be a nice thing. If we do this, continue this workshop theme, we should look for ways of bringing things together, because both sections involved sound and codes, and we shouldn't necessarily keep the textile artists away from the the instrument makers, especially when Paola is around doing both. And then Berit Grinke appears, and hello Berit, and says, I would be interested in hearing some thoughts on improvisation. It's done in live coding. How does it come into play when making textiles? She also says thank you very much for everyone in the session, which I echo. So that's, so we've talked a lot about codes in this session, but less about improvisation, I think. Have you got some perspectives from Andean Textiles about how they improvise? Is everything pre-planned, or how do they?
In the case of Andean Textiles, let's say this connection with sound, it's not as clear, up to date. But in the case of Amazonian textile, yes, and as I was telling before, this performance that I talked about two women painting one, this vessel or the ceramics, one painting the designs in one side without being able to see the other one at the other side. It was improvised, of course. No? Actually, the challenge has to do with this, to sort of coming with a common rhythm and a common song to know which is the design that should be used. So yes. So in that case, I mean, from the Amazonian, and in this case of this performance, yes, of course, improvisation is key. In the case of my performance, it's all improvised. Actually, my idea was to do these devices, so to be able to play it so they could be played by anyone. I mean, I'm not a musician, so I thought it from a non-musician mind. Said like, what can be interesting, and also sort of there's this question, let's say, about how we approach improvisation or performances for a live audience, and we tend to have this very, by now, common setup, no, that usually involves metal and plastic and a certain movement and maybe a keyboard or this sort of I don't remember the name, but these very common things that we expect, no. So in that sense, I wanted to go beyond that, no, and improvise in a very different way, not also in the sound aspect, but also in the gesture aspect.
I guess it's also possible to improvise the textile itself in the sense of making a textile without knowing what you're going to make until and responding to the textile as you're making it. Is that something which is present in Andean textiles that you know?
I think in the case, I mean, in that sense, I think one needs to understand a bit more Andean thought and how it's very, very structured, and especially the type of thinking from, say, that comes from the Inca sort of influence. I wouldn't say improvisation was something that was looked forward to. I mean, it's actually a different set of mind. So I've recognized this improvisation interest within the Amazonian communities, but not so much from the Andean communities. I think it has, there's this sort of, this, I won't say rejection, but maybe it has to do in a way with aesthetics. Definitely has to do with a way of viewing the world, that it's basically seen as very, very structured, and that it should be kept as structured, no? So no improvisation as such. I mean, let's say weavers sometimes, one could say that improvise in the sense that they don't have, they might not have the exact design that they want to weave. Especially this can be seen when, more like touristic areas in which they are weaving for tourists, but they always use designs that have been, that are millennia old. So that's something that shouldn't be ruptured. In the case of Chipivo Texta in particular, they are interested in experimentation, but up to a certain, let's say this kind of structure, this grid sort of structure, shouldn't be ruptured. And this is very interesting because this, let's say this sort of grid, imagine it as a grid. It's interesting because if you rupture the continuity in between these threads, it's seen as connected to the devil. It's sickness. It has to do with sickness. Mm-hmm. So the order and the symmetry has to do with health, and the chaos and the rupture of these patterns has to do with sickness, which is something really interesting, and personally made me also very interested in glitch art. No, but that's another line. No. That would be too long. But yeah.
Brilliant. Great. Well, this has been really fascinating. Thanks so much, Paola. I think our time is up. I look forward to discussing more with you on the forums and hopefully in real life, not too distant future. Thanks.
Hopefully.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll see.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks
contributed.
everyone. Thanks everyone for your questions and being here with us. Just seen Takuta appear with unmuted microphone. Did you want to say something, Takuta, or is that Takuta?
No. I was just thinking to answer when there was this question of weaving, but I posted on the.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we can continue this on the forum on forum.toplap.org in the hybrid live coding section. There's an algorithmic heritage bit. Great. Thanks everyone, and see you there and same time tomorrow. And have a nice next time period wherever you are in your time zone. Thank you everyone. Bye.